Hello, everyone. Welcome to Collaborative Conversations on Building a Culture of Writing, a series designed to build teachers' capacity for writing instruction. Before we start the live conversation, we invite you to start and continue the conversation on Twitter. Use hashtag Culture of Writing at Godot ELA to start the conversation. Today is the fourth 612 session entitled Writing Across the Curriculum. In this session, participants will deepen their understanding of how to support students with synthesizing information and sharing their understanding of key concepts and ideas. We are very excited to welcome Dr. Megan Adams and Corey Tuttle as they share research and best practices for supporting students with writing across the curriculum. Before their session begins, you'll first hear from our colleague, deepen from Special Education Services and Supports. Deepen will briefly review the principles for Universal Design for Learning in hopes that you will keep these in mind as you hear from today's presenters and prepare to plan instruction to meet the needs of all students. Deepen will return again at the end of the presentation to highlight some of the concepts that will be shared today and to offer several additional strategies. So without further delay, let's begin and continue building a culture of writing.
Good morning. As a part of developing lesson plans for students, one of the challenges that you face is planning for the learning needs of a wide variety of students. One of the frameworks that's been showing promising success for that is Universal Design for Learning. Universal Design for Learning, or UDL as most people call it, briefly is a framework that allows a teacher to build strategies, materials, and techniques into their lesson plans that not only reduce the barriers to instruction and learning, but also provide flexibility in the ways that you can engage students, in the ways you present information to your students, and in the ways students can respond to show their grasp of the information that you are providing. In order to provide that flexibility, UDL utilizes a framework of 3 principles. These are based in the neuroscience of how individuals learn and are the basis of UDL. These principles allow teachers to develop multiple means of engaging students to create purposeful and motivated learners, multiple means of representing the information that students need to learn, providing different ways for students to perceive, process, and comprehend those materials, and lastly, multiple ways for students to act on the information that they're learning and ways that they can express their knowledge of what they've learned. As you listen today, keep in mind these 3 principles and how you might be able to use them to develop a lesson plan framework for your students. You can find additional information on UDL and assistive technology by using the link on this slide. This will also is the same link that you will use to access the recorded webinar. So I will see you after the webinar to talk about what Megan and Corey have discussed and how that fits into UDL. Thank you, and Megan, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm Dr. Megan Adams. I'm an assistant professor of reading education at Kennesaw State University, and I'm here with my doctoral candidate, Corey Tuttle.
Hi, I teach at Osborne High School in Cobb County. I'm an English teacher. It's my 12th year teaching, and I'm almost done with my dissertation.
So we're going to talk to you today a little bit about writing across the curriculum. I also think of it as content area or disciplinary writing. So first, many of you have probably taught through the various cycles of curriculum change. And the history is not meant to give you a lecture or to give you a bunch of information that might not be immediately relevant in your classroom. Instead, it's just meant to make sure that we're all using the same context. So what we mean when we talk about writing across the curriculum comes from a history of programs primarily at the college level to make sure that students were writing in different content areas in the way that's demanded by that content. So during the 70s and 80s, and you'll see some specifics on this slide, colleges ensured that writing was occurring across the curriculum. Writing like a scientist, a mathematician, a historian, those were concepts that were incredibly important for students to be successful as undergraduates in particular. By the end of the 1980s, there was a survey done by MLA. Many of you probably used MLA formatting in your English classes, and especially as an undergrad. And they found that writing was occurring in the majority of college courses. Also, I think importantly, it was occurring from the bottom up. So faculty were demanding that writing occur, and they were trained to teach writing in their courses. We've had some conversations just around the table today that elementary teachers often know how to do that quite well. And even I think middle school teachers, because they're trained in multiple content areas, are often very familiar with that. By the 1990s, reading and writing in the content areas was receiving a lot of attention, and it became very popular as an idea to engage all learners. So what you just heard about UDL, this was a way that you could really make sure that all students were engaged and had equal access to that curriculum. So this allowed for a shift to K-12, though I think we'll talk in some detail later about what maybe we need for high school teachers. I was a high school language arts teacher as well, and I think Corey and I have some ideas that might be helpful there. So academic literacies, writing across the curriculum, content area writing, content area reading, these are all similar in some really important ways. So there's a focus and insistence on deep learning, so writing in order to get beyond the surface area of the learning. There's also writing in different ways and for different purposes. When we teach for various writing tests, I think we know that we need to think about that. It's not just writing for English language arts mastery, for example. Exposure to different sentence structures and writing purposes, and doing that through reading across content areas. Using PBL is one way to make sure that students are able to do that. And also there's evidence that writing is a more disciplined form of thinking. So, for example, for today, I had to take notes to make sure that I was thinking through what I was going to present. So I think many of us know that as students ourselves, we need to write in order to make sure we've mastered the content. So I'd like you to think for just a moment about how often your students write. So whether they're in your classroom, at home, on a bus, when are your students writing? So I'd like you to think in particular about social media, writing music. There's a lot of information about remixing and digital literacies as things that students are engaging in. So for those of us who are ELA teachers, it might seem pretty obvious. So we see them using creative writing as an outlet. But it occurred to me recently that I'm not always aware of the way that my undergraduate college students, and I certainly wasn't as a high school teacher aware of how my high school kids were writing all the time. So whether it was a tweet, a text, an email, something on social media, they were spending a lot of time writing. So understanding that incorporating vocabulary and grammar into writing instruction is a part of what we do as ELA teachers, I'd also like you to think about, what about the content area teachers? So what does writing mean? Do they know how to write in a third-person passive voice for science, for example? So I'd like for you to think about that as we move into the next parts of the presentation. We have some activities for you. Research does suggest that writing in essay forms contributes most to students' content knowledge. And in the text that's cited there, one of the things they talk about in detail is that even using essay questions as opposed to multiple choice can make a big difference in students' mastery of that content. So before we move into the first interactive portion of our session, are there any questions? It could be lighting, sound. Are there any things that need to be clarified?
Feel free to use the chat feature to ask our presenters any questions you may have.
Okay, great. Hopefully that means it's going well on your end. Okay, so let's discuss what content area demands are. So why do students need to be able to write well in specific content areas? If you would, please use the chat feature or tweet your response to Culture of Writing. I'll give you a few minutes to think about that. Why should students write in our content areas, and what skills do they need to be able to do that well?
So I think this is the part where you actually have to type in stuff. I mean, I don't know, I'm new to the whole webinar thing, but I'm pretty sure we need to see responses. There are 14 or 15 of you. We don't have any yet. So add your response. I think you can answer the question that's on the slide, just so we have something to continue to talk about. There we go.
Thank you.
Okay. Marta Anderson, sorry, and I'm sorry, I'm not looking into space, the screen where I can see your responses are over there. She said to have time to reflect about the text and then time to discuss with peers before writing. That is, you know,
critically important. Are any of you content areas other than language arts today?
oh, tweeted, okay. I think Ashley can't see us. It says up there. Ashley asked if she should be able to see us.
Oh.
So we have middle school science and social studies. We have an art teacher. Yay.
Perfect.
Looks like Tara Campbell tweeted, which we're looking for.
So those that we have science, social studies, and art. We're going to talk more a little later about middle school teachers and the team construct, because you guys really have got this content area writing figured out, we think. But also, we'd like to know what do we know is needed in your content areas. So we know that students need to be able to read the text and respond. We hope that they'll be thinking through their responses before they do that writing. We totally agree with you. But what are some specific demands in those content areas? So specifically, we have art, social studies, and science. What writing demands do you have in your content areas? I don't see any yet. So I'll give an example. You guys may be thinking.
Research.
Perfect.
For sure.
I have a very good friend who's an art historian, and when she teaches art history, in particular to very new undergrads, she teaches the course through essay responses. And having to compare different periods of art movements through writing is significantly more challenging than having a multiple choice test where she puts up a slide and you respond which of the following it is. So it really does get at that idea that there's a deeper learning required if you have to, as a teacher, construct the questions that you want responses to, and as a student to have to craft those responses.
So Tara says in art, have them write research papers on the history of ceramics, research a ceramic artist, a technique sheet on how to use a technique in art.
Perfect.
I know in like health and PE, a lot of times they have to write essays or different, do research as well, and write different responses about whatever different health and PE issues. Ms. Campbell says as well they have to create a PowerPoint for their presentation to share the results of their research. Good. So you're hitting a lot of language arts standards as well.
That's right. Perfect. So we have an activity. We're going to do this along with you, so we'll brainstorm, and hopefully you all will be as forthcoming as you have been in sharing those ideas, but we'll share ours as well. So we'd like to spend about 5 minutes brainstorming a writing prompt for students in various content areas. So for example, we might have students come into our 8th grade Georgia Social Studies class and write a defense or a prosecution plan for a court case that was in the news. And I pulled that idea directly from the Georgia Social Studies standards. So recently, Dylan Roof was in the news. When I was teaching, none of you, there may be no one familiar with this, but there was a case in Athens where a man named Jamie Hood had taken hostages, and so there was a court case that would have been really easily recognized by my students. It was something they talked about a lot. And so that would be a case that I could use. You could think of specific examples locally or something that's more in the national news. But basically what you're thinking through is what arguments would need to be made to convince the jury to convict, what arguments would need to be made to convince the jury to acquit. So take some time and think about how you would formulate a prompt that would get your students to think through those social studies standards that way. What would they need to write, and what would your instructions be? If you have any questions, please do use the chat feature or Twitter to ask for clarification before starting your activity.
Okay, so we're just working with the social studies prompt, or are we also, if we're a science teacher, doing science?
Great question. So that's a great question. So if you're a science teacher, you could come up with a different writing prompt. It could be a defense or prosecution for something science-based, though. So for example, if there was someone, a court case where a defendant was trying to say that that a medical procedure was necessary for a patient, your science students would need to use the actual science to talk about why that was necessary.
And if we're language arts, do you want us to do a language arts one, or do you want us to think outside and think of
That's a great question. I think language arts folks, one of the things we're going to be focusing on today when we talk about the PBL in particular is how, as language arts teachers, as much as we love having them read the novels and respond to those, that maybe we could look at having them respond using different content area standards from our own. So if your language arts focus still on perhaps the social studies prompt or something for another content area. Another idea would be you could have students create a prompt that would have been used in a historical case. So for example, if your students are studying Brown versus the Board of Education, you could have them talk about what the prosecutors would have been doing to prepare for that case. So do use whatever's applicable for your content area. We want this to be something that you could use right away.
And they should type that in the chat box?
Please do. We'll give you a few minutes to think about it, and then please do. Okay. And we'll work on ours as well.
about 3 more minutes or so, I think.
I'm liking Corey's idea.
Just randomly, I was like, all right.
Okay, so if anybody's ready to start to share out, we'll go ahead and start that. All right. Thank you. Can you see that far?
I can. Will you scroll up a little bit so I can read the top part of that? A little bit more. I can't see this. Just difficult at times? Oh. What do I have thinking about it? Where am I? Oh, right below it. Okay, sorry. Aaron Thaler said, while I'm thinking about it, one of the questions that ultimately comes from teachers with a preponderance of students struggling with comprehension of the content is about time. The higher level questions are where we want students to be, and scaffolding is good and necessary. However, many teachers get stuck in the lower level part of the question, actually understanding a court case in the news and then settle for a prompt explaining it, never getting to the arguments because just getting to the content. Does that make sense?
It does. And I totally agree with you. One of the things we'd really like, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, is for this to be the beginning of a conversation and not the typical webinars I attend are a complete conversation. So I watch the webinar, it exists in a bubble, and then I move on and maybe it impacts my teaching or maybe it doesn't. What we'd like today is to start a conversation. So we're going to talk about these things and hopefully give you a few tools that you could use. The follow-up will allow you to delve into some of this a little more deeply. But ultimately, we know that a week from now or 2 weeks from now, you may be sitting in a classroom thinking, okay, I really want to do this, but I don't have time and I need some ideas. And we would both very much like to be a resource for that. That won't give you more time from bell to bell, of course. But we think that some of what we can do is help each other think through how maybe what we could do is, instead of even starting with a lower level question, can we dive right into something like this type of prompt? And if we know that somebody's tried it and had success in their classroom, I think most of us are more likely to say, okay, I'm willing to try that. It sounds like it worked. And so thank you for sharing that. I totally agree. I think for most of what we want to do in teaching, it's about time, right? Are there any others?
I would have, Ashley Morris says, I would have the students identify and evaluate potential counterclaims that would be presented. I would encourage them to determine the most effective rebuttals to those counterclaims. That's a really good one. We're talking in my class right now, or we just created the end unit that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but we were talking about fake news versus real news as well, and having kids actually identify, especially with all the political stuff going on right now, where there's lots of alternative facts, I think is the new term for fake news or whatever else. But like having kids actually identify in a research paper they're going to write the real research from some of the, the state databases, and then also finding fake news about that so that they can look at how what's out there that is false about their topic. So that's a really good one with the claim and counterclaims. I think there were a couple more. Social studies, Ms. Campbell says, students can create brochures advertising the geographic regions of the state. It's a good one, incorporating lots of different language arts standards, and I'm sure social studies ones that go along with that. Music, students can write a critique of a musical group. And then 9th grade lit, students can analyze JFK's speech for what he believed about America, providing evidence, claim, reason, evidence, or claim, sorry, reason, evidence. Also, that uses inference and a lot of other skills as well.
Absolutely.
Does anybody else have any ideas? Were there any above that at all?
I think no. Okay. So I'll share, my prompt would be to create an argument that the defense attorney could use in the state of Georgia versus Jamie Hood. Citing specific examples from your research, outline how you would give evidence to the jury. You, as the student, are assuming a not guilty plea on the part of Mr. Hood. So some questions they might think about, some ideas for them to think about as they start their research. What do you know about Mr. Hood's past? What might have caused his actions? And certainly rely on any proof that you've found. And here I think you could get into their analysis of the sources they're using, which is, of course, hitting multiple social studies standards. It also, of course, in any of these cases, hits multiple language arts standards for writing. They're using informational texts in order to create these essays and defenses. And would you share yours as well?
Sure. And also, Tara also said, and this kind of goes along with what I'm about to say, after reviewing all the court evidence, choose to work for either the defense or the prosecution and give your closing arguments to the jury in order to either convict or acquit your defendant. Could be social studies or even ELA with book characters.
That's right.
So I was going to mention, I'm sure you've all heard, if you teach lit at all or high school lit, so we read Romeo and Juliet most of the time across the world in America in ninth lit. We always do in my class, or we have the last couple of years, Romeo and Juliet's our argumentative or persuasive essay. So we actually have a court case. So I have kids have to pick which person they think is most to blame, because that's the essay that they're going to write. So this is kind of the pre-writing part of it. They have to pick, let's say, Friar Lawrence is to blame, or the parents are most to blame, and then they have to, they're in like a group of three. One person's the character, one person's the prosecutor, and one person's the defense attorney. They have to actually come up with text evidence to prove why that person's to blame. And then, you know, I have different kids be the judge, and I have a fake gavel, and like they wear a graduation robe, and they love it, and I have the room all set up. But it really does help them because, hey, they're writing an essay about who's the most to blame, and they've just found all the evidence with their claim and their counterclaim for why that person's most to blame and why they may not be, somebody else may be more to blame. And then the other idea that I just had for science was I was just thinking of global warming. You could create some kind of plan to accuse different companies of contributing to the problem. Students would have to research different companies and the effects that those companies have on the environment, create maybe a list of the worst offenders, which I'm sure is out there. And then from there, they could even have like a verbal debate or a courtroom trial where they kind of the same idea of maybe if they wanted to have a three-person team, or one person was the defense for the company, one was the prosecutor against them, and one was the actual company. So the company person would have to come up with their reasons why they're not, why they're really not contributing to global warming or other things like that. So just a random idea.
Those are great. Thank you for participating as well, audience. So we've already done the chatting and tweeting that are on this slide, but do please keep in mind that the tweets will continue following this presentation. There are some great, under the hashtag culture of writing, some great tweets from former presentations in this series. So I think it's a good way for all of us to stay in touch.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about, since I am currently in the classroom, about what we're doing. One way that we have found that really works to help incorporate writing across different subject areas. I teach in high school, and we're on block scheduling. So it's really hard because the majority of my kids that are in ninth lit in the fall are maybe not in science, and they may not be in social studies in that semester. So it's really hard to work with other teachers. If you were a science teacher and I was an English teacher, well, only like 10 of my kids may have, and they may not even have you. So we all know that's an issue in a lot of high schools in Georgia, not all of them. Middle school, you have less of that issue, so it's nice. I've taught 8th grade for 5 years in Florida. So that part is nice. It's easy to coordinate with other teachers. But PBL is one way that it's really easy to kind of work across the board. And you can do it in different ways. There's either problem or project-based learning. It's kind of the P, can be for different ways. And it really helps. You can either use it in your language arts class, those of you who are English teachers, to kind of come up with the ideas, and then you can use your other subject area teachers as resources, or you can have, in a science class, you can have a PBL, and you can use your English teacher as a resource to help students work with their writing up the research and kind of making the presentation for it. So it's really easy with that. I'm going to give you student examples in just a second. We'll go through a couple of slides. So in ninth lit, I teach at Osborne in Cobb County. For those of you who aren't aware of the school, we're the highest percentage of free and reduced lunch in Cobb County. We don't have any kind of special charter or magnet program at our school. I absolutely love the school, but it does have its challenges, like a lot of the schools you guys may teach at as well. So I'm just saying that to say this is not like your perfect, perfect school with that in mind. So with ninth lit, we've done the PBL for 3 semesters now. The first semester it was not very successful. We we kind of tried it. We did it in like a 2-week beginning of the unit. Our first unit's identity in ninth lit. And we just had kids pick a problem in their community or school and figure out how to solve it. And we did not have the best of projects, and that's okay. It was a learning experience, like everything in teaching. We, learn and grow and adapt things from other people and change. So last semester we did it as well, but we tried to do it as a semester-long project where students started at the beginning and had ideas and continued to work on it throughout the semester. And some of the teachers, there are 4 of us on ninth lit at my school. 2 of the teachers had really good success with some of theirs. One of that was an honors teacher, so obviously our honors students are going to be a little more advanced. I had all co-taught, so it was a little more challenging to get some of these kids to do the stuff. And some of the projects were great, but we really struggled as a team, the teachers, to have checklists, checkpoints. When one student's doing a project about a school garden, another student's doing bringing awareness about LGBTQ issues, and another student group is doing fixing school lunch. Those are really hard because one's awareness and it's more like a project. One is like fixing a problem about school lunch, and one's more of a project creating a garden. So we really struggled with that. The nice thing about what we've decided for this semester, and actually I had a PL day yesterday to plan it, so I'm really excited about what our unit is. But we're doing we're picking one problem per teacher that is at our school or in our community. And we're challenging our kids to, in groups, fix that one problem or bring awareness about that one thing. So my class is going to do, we have PBIS at my school, which is Positive Behavior Intervention System. But it's fairly new, and students don't really know what it is. They get tickets when they have good behavior, but they're like, what do I do with these tickets? I don't know. So my classes, and I'm going to make a video. It's our 3rd unit, so at the end of the semester. But I'm going to make a video of the people in charge, kind of tasking my students with this thing to get PBIS out there, to make people aware of it. What does it do? How do they use it? What are the tickets for? And then with that, they're also going to have to do a big research paper. So obviously I'm an English teacher, so we're incorporating lots of different elements, and that's one thing I love about the PBL, because it really does incorporate all the language arts standards, as well as you can incorporate it with other subject areas. So if students are working on a garden, they really can go talk to we encourage them to go talk to the science teachers about how to, the best ways to grow, and we do have an agriculture class, things like that is helpful. But it incorporates all the reading, lots of different writing styles, presentation, listening, speaking, because they're working in a group with that. So in our PBL that we're doing, one of the big things with PBL is having an authentic audience. We didn't the first semester. It was very weak. And we said, basically, put up a flyer. And students were like, okay. And nobody saw the flyer, or if they did, we didn't know if they had any response. So last semester, we made them, if we had students go to an elementary school and teach a language arts lesson, and they couldn't just teach the lesson, they also had to get feedback from the class. So it had to be interactive in some way, shape, or form. Some of the groups one of the groups, they collected donations for homeless, and they went out and they actually gave them to the homeless people, and they talked to them, and they interviewed them on video. So we saw that kind of interaction, as opposed to just saying, I went and fed the homeless, and great, that's awesome that you did that, but that's not, there's not that audience aspect. So with the PBL that we're doing this semester, we're basically having our classes kind of compete over one issue. And then, so in my first block, let's say, 5 groups or so, and they're going to compete for the best kind of presentation of a portfolio. And then those 3 blocks are then going to compete against each other with the top. And they'll be in front of admin and the people in charge, and they will actually vote and pick the group, and then they'll actually implement the stuff in school the next year, which I'm really excited about. So students are going to have to do surveys, they're going to have to interview their teachers, they're actually going to have to write a letter to either parents, or if they were doing a different type of PBL, maybe to businesses, or to get donations. They're going to have to make flyers and posters, a commercial to advertise PBL. We're going to have them do like a hashtag for Instagram and like a slogan, and then a t-shirt design. And then also, and so that's kind of the elements in the portfolio that they're going to present. They also are going to have to write a research paper, which we're going to have like a collaborative writing. So we're going to have it on, we use Google Docs for a lot of stuff. Doesn't matter what type of collaborative writing they do. Microsoft Word works, all of those different ones. But where they write in different colors. So if my piece may be in blue, yours may be in green, yours may be in red, so that I as a teacher can see who's contributing which part. And they're working together, which really does help scaffold for our lower students. Another great thing about PBL, it is differentiation in almost every aspect of it. You can choose your groups for your students. You can have them choose their own groups. You can group them ability-wise. It's choice. They're choosing all these different aspects, what parts they want to work on, what parts, if they're an artist, they may do the t-shirt design, or they may do some other part of it. So with the paper, I'm writing my dissertation right now, so I apologize, but the paper basically looks a lot like one, but they're going to start out like introducing the problem, give a rationale, research question. The next section is going to be current research. So we're going to have them actually find, and we just brought in our media specialists to come in and talk with the kids. One from the databases, one from another online source that's a credible source, so we're talking a lot about credible sources. And then another paragraph about fake news. So they're going to have to actually find 2 articles and then identify the bias, propaganda, rhetoric, use an online fact checker. So because those are real life skills the kids need to know how to do. They need to know how to check if an article from The Onion is true or not, which, it's mostly not satire, but so that they're not believing a lot of stuff out there that's, alternative facts with all that. Another paragraph or section will be data collection. So looking at their methods. Did they do interviews? What were their interview questions? Did they have some kind of group that spoke? And then what did they find? We probably will have them go work with the math teachers, because those of us who are English teachers, statistics are not my strength. I'm doing qualitative, not quantitative. So we may go have them talk to the math teachers about coming up with statistics for all these things. Google Forms does do little pie charts, which is awesome. But and then another section, interpretation. So they'll have to actually connect what they found back to the current data. So to see how it supports it or how it doesn't support it. And then like a reflection. So what worked, what didn't work, changes, what was successful, future projects, the hardest part. And that's like a big paper. And then after that, they'll have a presentation where they'll basically do a PowerPoint of some sort, where they have the research question, a couple of facts, then present the actual elements of the ad, the commercial, the flyer, the t-shirt, and then their reflection. And that's what they'll present and compete kind of with in the presentation part. PBLs are scary sometimes because there are thousands of ideas out there, and there are thousands of different ways to do it. We're hoping this one will be more successful, and if it isn't, we're going to try again. I also love PBL because it really does get kids involved in their community and getting them caring about what's going on and what can they do, so that they really are people who can go out in the real world and make a difference, is all of our hopes for our students. A really good resource is the Buck Institute. Can I click on that? Oh, there it is. I'm just going to click on this. Hopefully it'll show you guys. Did I click? Or not? Okay, so the link will be sent to you, but on the Buck Institute, I think that link goes directly to, it does a project guide, basically, where you can put in your grade level, you can put in your subject area, you can even pick what standards you want it to focus on, whether it's RL, the literacy, or the RI, or a different writing strategy or standard, and then you hit select, and then it gives you a list of ideas of PBLs that you can do. There's a more project, but it doesn't matter. But it really is a great resource. They have tons of different ideas and tons of different stuff that you can use to create it. And I mean, I would just say try it. I have a couple of slides that the next couple are student projects that students did last semester. Maybe? Oh. Is it messed up because I did that? There we go. Okay, so this one was a really cool one. The students in Lit last semester, they actually had this, they came up with the idea, but they didn't actually implement it. And then they connected it this semester with they're in ROTC, these students. They called it Operation Brightbox, and they actually are doing it right now at my school. They're having people bring in hygiene products. They're actually going to go to students in need. So it actually carried over into ROTC. This could connect with a health class really easily as well. If students wanted to do this kind of project, and that was the flyer that actually is all around our school right now. Okay, so this one was the student created an Instagram account to help. Obviously, we can't solve depression, but hopefully we can help bring about positivity in people's lives who maybe are negative or are suffering from depression in any way, shape, or form. And so she would post pictures, and then from those pictures, she wrote captions. And on those captions, she actually had a direct message from somebody. Her IG account was For a Better Life. And then the student, somebody else responded, I didn't know you were that good at giving advice. And then she responds back, yeah, I plan on spreading positivity in hopes that people are uplifted and spread positivity themselves, kind of like a chain reaction. And then the student responded, respect, but your captions have really helped me these couple of days. My stepdad and mom have been fighting a lot. When I get on Instagram, your captions would pop up, kind of like God wanted me to see them. I'll share them on my page. Hopefully it helps your project. So she kind of had written on the top of her account. But that's the authentic audience piece. So it's not just making an Instagram account and it's just out there, making a YouTube video and just putting it out there. It's actually, they had to get followers, and she had 29 followers in 2 days. And then she had people make responses and write kind of comments and things like that. So that was a really interesting, a psychology class or a social studies class could connect with this really easily. And then obviously we do canned food drives all the time everywhere, but this was one these students chose to do that. They sent it to a church, a local church, and they collected a lot of cans. They also, another group did a community garden that actually is growing. We have a greenhouse at school, so easy science connection with that, and if you have other like agriculture classes with those.
It looks like we have some comments already, but Corey would love to give more specific examples of how her school chose this, how it was implemented. She's told you kind of how it has worked, but in the beginning, I remember having a meeting with her about her dissertation, and she was telling me they were thinking of adopting a model where everything would be more about informational text and business education. And so obviously they ended up working through that as a team and deciding on this. So she gave you some examples from the students, but if you have additional questions, I see that we have some comments already. Please pose those through chat or Twitter.
So Ashley Morris said, love PBL, such a natural and authentic way to engage students and promote teacher collaboration. And these are the types of learning experiences that change students' lives. They really are, and it doesn't matter what school you're at, anywhere, or even what grade level. The BIE website has stuff from elementary school to high school and beyond. And I even had a class at KSU that was on service learning with Dr. Terry. So things like that really do, it's a lifelong thing. We hope we all can be people that go out, and all of our students can be people that go out and actually make a difference in the world. We are going to put on, Megan's going to talk later about a website that she has that has resources that we're going to put, and I have on there, or she's going to put on there, a link of, we basically brainstormed last year topics that our students could do. So I have a ton of ideas with all of that. One of the other English teacher, she's going to actually have the Communities in Schools resource, basically the school social worker come in and talk with her for a little bit and give her the idea to give to the kids of the problem that they can solve. So their class is going to try to solve that problem instead.
You'll see too that we started the morning using the hashtag culture of writing, so it'll be easy for you guys to find us other than just using email as well and that website.
Can you go down a little bit? I think was there more? I just saw stuff. Okay.
Okay. Okay, we'll move forward then. So this is the website Corey was just mentioning. I'm going to apologize in advance because I am not as tech savvy as many of you probably are. But what I loved about this is it's a way that you can create pages that your students can use. So if you go to educatorpages.com, just generally, you can create your own website this way. And so it allows us to share resources with each other. And it's another way for us to kind of take on this project to see what we can do to create a collaborative space for language arts teachers and content area teachers interested in reading and writing in their content area across the state. So there's great literature on writing across the curriculum, and we shared some of it with you about the history in the beginning of the presentation. But we didn't want to spend the limited time we have with you this morning just throwing resources at you. So many of those, if you want the literature behind PBL or writing across the curriculum, will be posted to the website you see here. And we'll use that space to share those resources and then gather resources from each other. So for example, the sheet that Corey's talking about has some great ideas that you could use tomorrow in your classroom. And I know that, like we talked about earlier, for the sake of time, it's always nice if you have something that's already been put together by a team from another school. For today, we want to spend the rest of our time focusing on how to teach writing in ways that support students' ability to synthesize information and allows them space to demonstrate their mastery of key concepts in each content area. So some of the projects that Corey just gave you as examples, how could we do that in our own classrooms? So the first question we have is just, what does that need to look like, and how can we do it and support all learners? So what are some ideas you have? It could be PBL or some other writing ideas that would support students' ability to synthesize information. What can we do to help them? Saying that they're going to turn in the research paper is fantastic, and maybe many of you have students who could do that from home with no problem. Many of my students needed support to be able to turn in a research paper that illustrated that kind of deep learning and mastery. So I think we may have a response.
No, that's a side note.
Okay.
It's a great side note, though, Erin. She's just, should I say it? Erin says that talking about finding ways to insert conversation about the power of authentic learning versus standardized testing into your conversations about the future of Georgia's education. And with all of this, like, honestly, it does fit into some of the end of course test prep stuff we do need to do, getting them to kind of look at questions and other, whether it's writing prompts or other things that really fit and look like the end of course test does. For ninth lit, at least, we have an end of course test. And so we just actually changed our essay for our current unit to make it, we gave them the text as opposed to having them just find it as we're reading. We read Mexican White Boy by Matt de la Pena as our first unit. So we actually gave them the text from Mexican White Boy and from The Absolute True Diver Part-Time Indian, which is their summer reading, but I formatted it where it looked just like the resources that the DOE gives us for the two essay, where they have the two ones where they have to synthesize and answer the question. So for our informative essay. So that's just an easy way to kind of connect more authentic stuff where, you know, maybe it is with the PBL and a part of the research where you're actually asking them constructed response questions maybe as you go along with some of the stuff you're researching for other things. Sorry, that was a little off, but I was just responding to Erin's.
No, I think that's a good point too. One of the things we talked about this morning was I always found with the writing test prompts with my students that it was infrequent that it had anything to do with a literary passage. It was more often something like gas prices were going to impact, or should we discontinue space exploration? So they were more topics that had to do with things that they would have been exploring in another content area or that was part of PBL. Additionally, we say this a lot in language arts, and I'm sure it's true for other content areas, but when my students were able to write in meaningful ways and prove their mastery through writing, they had no trouble with responding to multiple choice questions. So the writing really sort of over prepared them. Instead of me spending my time focusing on how they would select the correct answer, they knew how to master that content and how to incorporate reading into the thinking part of synthesizing information. But that's a good point. One other thing to note maybe is that as this series is going on, simultaneously the same folks are putting together or have put together a literacy think tank where we're working on exactly what Erin is talking about. What are the ways that we need to change literacy instruction across the state in order to make sure that we're reaching all students and having a great impact. So thank you for that point. Any other comments or questions about how we can make sure that students are synthesizing information in meaningful ways? Okay. So we're asking you to do another activity now, and this should be a fun one, I hope. Using either a Word document or just, I'm going to use pen and paper myself. We want you to take a minute and write about your most memorable writing activity in school, and it could be activity or activities. And this could be when you were in elementary school, middle school, high school, college. And we want you to think through, what was the assignment? Do you remember loving or hating the assignment? I should note here, some of my most memorable writing experiences were not positive writing experiences. And so think about that process. And then as you're thinking about that, you can tell us, what did the instructor do? How did he or she encourage writing or discourage writing? We're going to give you no more than 5 minutes to think about this. We don't want this to become something that you spend hours doing. We're going to share those briefly, but if you come up with something, if this really sparks something, it did for me, is why I'm saying that. If it really sparks something where you realize you maybe are teaching in a way that you didn't love, we are happy for you to email those, and we can post them on the website where we're all going to share. So for now, just take a few minutes to write about your most memorable writing encounter, and then we'll share those out. Okay. This is great. So there's a question, I think it's Tamika Thomas. I love the focus on PBL. What, if any, are the challenges of getting other content area teachers on board? I'm going to let Corey answer that one.
I think it depends on your setting. Number one, once again, if you're middle school, it's a lot easier. Principals tend, and we do have a principal in the room, I saw earlier somebody posted, but principals tend to love this because it really does get kids to think outside of just their little content area, which is what this is all about, and think about the real world, and actually has real world implications that students can learn to really actually do something to make a change. I think doing a little research yourself, maybe going to look at the BIE website, kind of check out what other teachers have done, even looking up, and I can help Megan put it on her website, some of the actual research that's out there about the success of PBL in improving students' reading and writing scores, because it's kids for the most part taking ownership over their learning, which is an important thing, especially in students who are maybe below grade level or whatever else. When they get excited about something because it's something that's theirs, they tend to work harder at it, and we don't have to like constantly like pull teeth to try to get them to write a sentence with that. So I think getting maybe a little bit of the research, kind of like understand it, and then from there possibly go to your principal, or if you have academic coaches at your school, they're a great resource a lot of times for PBLs. And getting maybe one person, if you have a group of 4 and you know these 2 are maybe going to be a little hesitant, maybe you can get the one person that hopefully you have on your team, at least one person that you collaborate with and tends to be excited about that kind of thing. Get them on board, and then from there maybe approach the other people and kind of have an idea of maybe what you want to do with it, kind of a focus, or a way you could incorporate it, let's say if you are middle school, with the 4 main content areas with that. And getting your principal, his approval and all that kind of thing. But I think first it starts with you kind of getting a better idea of kind of what you want to do with that.
I was thinking the same thing. So my teaching background was in rural schools, and in each setting I had a core group of people who are still some of my very best friends, and we were across content areas. So if you know who the people are who would be excited about trying something new, it might be worth doing a pilot and saying, I'm the language arts teacher, so for 10th grade lit, I'm going to do this, and then figuring out who's excited about that in social studies, science, and math. And that would be an easy way to do it. And again, getting the principal on board, and then if that group has success, then of course it's much easier to get people to buy in because you've had a group who's had students who have really shown some success with that.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, going to the principal or your guidance counselors or even businesses in the area, talking to the principals first, finding out, hey, what are some problems you'd like us to solve?
Right.
Is it attendance? Is it dropout rates? And not that you necessarily will be able to fix it, but can you bring awareness? Can you help actually improve business relations? Is that what you'd like us to work on? Or if there is a business partner with your school, maybe the business has an issue that they'd like to address. Maybe they want interns. Maybe they have a problem reaching the younger youth, the youth, and that they want to help from students on how to get out there on Instagram or on Snapchat or whatever it may be, so that students are actually participating. So that's another way to get kind of ownership of the school first, kind of, and have ideas of things that you as a teacher can kind of bring to your students about fixing in that area if you wanted to do more of a problem-based one.
So that they're engaged.
So we do have some.
I think we have some,
hopefully
some examples of writing experiences too. Thank you guys so much for your participation. It really means a lot too. Go ahead.
So Tamika also said, one of my most memorable writing experiences was an assignment to write a poem in elementary school. I enjoyed it, because I love writing poetry. Ashley Morris said, in 4th grade we wrote letters to Oprah. The topic was how we plan to impact or inspire others. Nice. Our teacher, Ms. Peacock, sent them off, and every single student received a letter back. Although the responses were similar and stamped with the famous purple O, I remember receiving my letter and thinking you can reach anyone through writing. It was a great experience. That's
awesome. A powerful one.
Mm-hmm. That was Sherilyn Lee. Oh, that was you. Sorry.
Do you want to share yours?
Sure, and I glanced at yours. Mine's very similar. So I went to the University of Florida. Sorry, don't hate me. But my freshman year I was in the honors program, and one of my first classes was called Writing and Love. I always have to emphasize the and, or it sounds like I'm saying writing and love. And so I walked into this room, and it was like this desks were in a circle. It was a smaller class, maybe 35, 30 desks. And there were a couple people sitting there with the journal open writing. And I was like, this is weird. I sat down, and after a few minutes of being like, all right, I pulled out my notebook and started writing. 15 minutes later, everybody was quiet. Everybody would come in. Everybody was sitting there writing because if everybody's writing, you feel awkward just sitting there not writing. And then finally, the professor was one of the people. He was younger, probably a younger professor, a cooler one. He introduced himself and started talking about class, and so we were all, people had started grumbling, like, 15-minute rule, it's time to leave, he's late, kind of the fake one in college. But with that, one of our assignments was we had to write in a journal every night for 15 minutes. He didn't care what we wrote about as long as we wrote. And I was always a journaler anyway in middle school and high school, just to kind of help my coping skill for dealing with adolescence. But it was a great way to really help incorporate that. I do that in my class. We have like a free write Friday every week where they just write about whatever for 5 minutes, just to kind of help work on writing fluency. So that's kind of something I've taken from that, and encouraging kids to write if they're, struggling with different stuff in their lives, because most of our kids are in some way, shape, or form with something. So that's helpful as well. That was mine.
So, did we have another? Okay. So mine was in high school. I was actually in Marietta City Schools. So at Marietta High School, Dr. Holmes made us write every Friday for 25 minutes. And I sometimes really loved the activity if I was having problems with my boyfriend, or, I really enjoyed the journaling part of it. But sometimes I really hated it, and it felt like such a chore to sit and write for that long. Similarly to Corey's experience, it could be personal, it could be generic. I had a friend who wrote nothing but limericks the entire school year. He might have done it multiple years, actually. But she would read those and respond, and that really stuck with me. And the idea was complete writing immersion, even if it was just once a week. So when I began teaching, I knew that that was something that was good for my students to do, much like I knew silent sustained reading was something really good for them to do. But I'm a little bit of a control freak, and I was very concerned about being able to make sure that I monitored that each minute was being spent on the appropriate thing. And I think what I've learned since is letting go of that control a little bit so that it's their time, because that's what it's meant to encourage. Means that they might not be writing the full time, and hopefully they're thinking about the writing, but letting go of that a little bit is really important. So that's my writing experience that should have become part of my teaching repertoire that didn't for so long. I don't see any from the rest of you, so we'll move forward. So now, this is my favorite one. We'd like you to do something similar, but we want you to take a moment to think about your most memorable experience teaching writing. So it could be a time you saw that light bulb moment with a student. It could be an activity that went really well that you weren't sure was going to, a tool that you often use. And again, we'd be delighted if you want to write or type that up to share on our webpage, especially if there's a tool that you know is just every time has been successful with writing, so that we can duplicate that in our own teaching. So we're going to give you maybe only about 3 minutes to think about your most memorable teaching moment with writing.
Do we want them to go ahead and share it on the chat as they finish?
Please do. So please tweet or chat about your favorite experiences teaching writing. And for the sake of time, maybe we should go ahead and share ours while they're finishing up.
Okay. Do you want me to start?
Sure.
Okay, so one thing that I love is using Google Docs. Honestly, I'm sorry if we're not, my district is not a Google district, so I get the issues that all of your schools have, but for the most part on the internet, students can use Google Docs. But I love it. Last year I had a co-teacher, and so it made it a little easier when you have extra help in the room, but I had students typing, And as they would finish, they would come up and tell me, Ms. Tuttle, I'm done. And then at that point, it would be in a shared folder. I would pull it up, and I would actually make comments as they were sitting there. They got such a kick out of it. They'd type back like, LOL, I see you. And I'd be like, okay, fix that, spelling error. Or I would just highlight something and say fix, instead of us becoming better editors, which is, struggle in language arts class. I'm a great editor. I've edited thousands of papers, but the students, when you fix it for them, they don't have to actually think about it. They just fix it. And so I tend to circle stuff or just highlight it and say fix, and then they have to figure out what's wrong with it. But they love the instant feedback of that. And with 2 people, it's a little easier with that. Also, we do an I'm Not poem that we've done for a couple of years. Instead of a Where I'm From poem or I am, there's another one I can't remember, but we do an I'm Not. So it's actually a counter narrative. So they pick labels that people or society puts on them. And then they push against that label. So they say why they're not either not that thing at all, or they're not just that one thing. So I have a lot of immigrant students, and they, a lot of them choose to write about why they're not illegal. And so they write about, things that they like, and it can be in any structure that they want. I personally tell them it needs to be at least like 15 lines, just so they get at least 3/4 of a page or so. It doesn't have to rhyme, but basically it's just pushing against that either stereotype or label. That it may not be put on them, and it may not be true at all, or it may not be fully true for who they are. So I love that one. And then the courtroom, the Romeo and Juliet, what I mentioned earlier, that's been really successful, having them prepare the trial and then actually doing the trial. And then that really leads them into writing a really strong argumentative essay. And it's great because they really are collaborating with each other, because their reasons for why that person is or aren't to blame are what they use in their essay. So they already have the text evidence, and that's been really successful as well. Those are my favorite ones currently.
So mine is a lesson that I learned. I love poetry, but I don't love analyzing poetry. And so the parts each year, I would wait until the very end of spring, and we would work on the rhyme scheme and the patterns and the imagery. And I just felt like something so it did not feel genuine to me. But I had a reader who was performing below grade level, and he found that he had a talent. I would let them bring songs in, and they would use the songs as a piece of poetry, and they would look at the imagery, the theme, the rhyme scheme, etc., and the general poetic devices. And he loved it. It was like a math problem for him. He just could have done it all day long. And buying into that activity led him to realize that he did not hate language arts, and he admitted he had hated language arts since 3rd grade, probably because he wasn't ever performing at that appropriate grade level and felt that he just didn't have the confidence. So because he became passionate about this activity, he believed me that he should read other things, and we saw this great increase. So though he struggled with some of we still had graduation tests at the time, he struggled with some content areas but did well in language arts, in part because he learned that it was much like other problems, that he could dissect those pieces of writing and make sense of them in ways that worked for him. So the poetry analysis is something that I emphasize, though it's not my favorite thing to do. It was that too math-like for me, but for a lot of my kids it was really a powerful lesson that helped them buy into language arts. So, yeah,
that just reminded me of, we just did translating pop song, like modern songs that they listen to. There's I can't remember his name. Somebody on the radio does this where he translates modern songs, like rap songs and hip hop songs, into standard English. So we talk a lot. This first unit's identity, so we're doing a lot with code switching and with different things like that. So I play one of those, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's hilarious!" Because he's like, "She has a very large posterior," and like things like that. When that's not what the song said. So then I give them a piece from a different song and have them translate it, and they're like, "I have no idea what he means." Like, there was something, a bando. It was something like that. It was an abandoned house, where it's usually used for selling drugs in this song. And so the translation is like going to a bando or something. And most of the kids are like, I have no idea what he's talking about. And then some of the kids are like, oh yeah, I know what that is. And so it really gives them, they get excited because they're trying to, but they're translating things into standard English, which is what, we have to teach them in English class, to translate the way that they speak or whatever, dialect or whatever they use into standard English. For these essays that they write in any subject area. We do it with, if you go Google pop sonnets, if you teach Shakespeare, it's the best thing ever. Somebody has already done that. They've translated these Shakespearean sonnets. No, they've translated pop songs. So they literally have Baby Got Back. They have Party in the USA by Miley Cyrus. They have all these other songs that are popular that the kids recognize. And they turn them into Shakespearean sonnets. So it's, and I can't even give you an example that's not from Baby Got Back right now, so I'm going to move on, but they're hilarious, and the kids love them, and they have a really hard time figuring them out. They're like, I have no idea what this song is. One of them's like, oh, what's the Bruno Mars song? Oh, you guys know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. The really popular Bruno Mars song a couple of years ago where everybody does the dancing to it. I can't think of it, but they do that song, and just Google pop sonnets. It's hilarious, and it's awesome, but it teaches them translation once again. It's already translated these pop songs into Shakespearean English, so when you're looking at translating Shakespeare into modern English, we do the balcony scene into texting lingo, so we actually give them a texting bubbles that they have to translate how Romeo and Juliet would text back and forth to each other. So they're like, LOL, bae, see you soon, you know, and they're writing a C and things like that. So it's another fun activity that the kids love, but it's working on translating and working on code switching and all those different ways. So those are other fun. Let's see. Robert, I'm not sure if this is Robert. Right. Teaching university students how to use Pizza Box as a portfolio to teach writing to their students, recognizing that the decorated box has a blank inside, bottom, and top for graphic organizers students see throughout the year. Okay. And then we have Tara also said, teaching students to peer review each other's writing. They learn so much from each other about how to strengthen their own writing. I agree for sure. I have a challenge with making peer editing work, though, especially if you have a lot of lower level students who don't recognize grammar mistakes and don't recognize. But it does help with that authentic audience piece because they are not writing just for you as the teacher. They actually know that they're going to have other people. So that is an important element, though. Also, Tamika says, placing an image on the board and having students create a newspaper article around what they see. That is also another, that's a really cool idea as well.
Thank you guys again. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Sixth grade crafted stories, piecing together documents. They wallpapered the room. And
I love that.
Nice. That's fun, like a big found poem almost all the way across the room. So one thing about connecting to your standards, PBL definitely does that. You can go on the DOE website and find the different standards to the different subject areas. So you're not just, and you can even have your students do that. That would be a great piece, honestly. I love to have my students actually teach the class a lot of times. And so having them actually, or you going in and looking for the science standards that relate to if they're doing a garden, or the social studies standards if they're looking at LGBTQ issues, or other things. So we can actually have it connect. But these, the PBL really does connect so much to the main language arts standards as well. So I guess how could we do this? How could you guys do this? What do we need to make this happen in our own classrooms? And just think about those things, like what do you need to make this work in your classroom, or if it's already working well, teaching across the curriculum, what do you do? And then what can you do to support other content areas and work together to increase students' writing and improve the quality of that writing? Does that mean that the science teacher connects with you as the language arts teacher and has you guys in class, like peer edit? Or are you giving the students the structure for the essay? Because a lot of times some of the other subject areas may be unclear as to how to structure the essays that they're having their students write that fits within what you're teaching them in language arts. So it's not a total disconnect. Maybe your school uses DBQs in social studies so that you in language arts are also using that lingo. So you're talking about bucketing things or whatever else it may be so that it's not super confusing for your kids when you're talking about a thesis. They're like, or a claim, they're like, huh, we did this, but so working with those other teachers, and what can we do to help you guys with any of those elements?
So for today, we wanted to give you some of this information, and of course you'll follow up. And in those discussions, you should definitely try to talk about what you need or what's working well so that we can collaborate with each other and help each other. But then beyond the presentation, using Twitter, email, and the chat feature won't be active anymore in the webinar. So it would just need to be one of those two, or our website we've created. We would love to help you with any of the above. So just let us know if there's something, a resource that you need, or something that we could help you with. Corey's suggestions of things that have worked really well in her school might be particularly helpful for some of you.
I'm more than willing to share anything. That's the great thing. I think all of us as teachers, we share and tweak and adapt it to our own room. So more than willing.
So instead of discussing so much today, because I know we're getting towards the end and need to have time to debrief with you all and how UDL applies, instead of tweeting about what you need in order to teach writing the way that you really want to, please save those and do tweet them to us following this, or use the website or our email addresses to stay in touch. But for now, we would like you to tweet any questions you have, any comments about the presentation, anything else that we might be able to help with right now. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please chat or tweet. Anybody? Sure.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you all very much.
This one really got my brain going when I was listening to you guys. What I try to do when I'm listening to the webinar is to listen to what you're saying and apply it to one of the 3 principles that we talked about. And one of the things I want to say is not always do we address every single principle in every single lesson. We may pick one that we really feel like is going to give us the most bang for our buck, or how we're going to do. Everything that you talked about, I could see and apply to one of those principles. But one of the things that I was thinking about was the first thing that you talked about when you were talking about the history. And it was the statement where the research saying that writing essays contributes the most to content knowledge. And I was thinking about that and thinking, okay, how can we apply that to UDL for our struggling learners? Which sometimes that is one of the hardest things that they have to do. You know, how can we make that go into expression, but not only in how we represent material, but in how we let them express and act on that material that they're learning. And one of the things I was thinking about, does it always have to be in an essay format? You know, it can be in a different writing genre. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about when you were talking about the James Hood case, mm-hmm. You know, maybe sitting down and writing the pros and cons in argument, in a debate, you know, what you would do. And you talked about, you know, setting up a courtroom and doing, and that's that same type of thing for doing that. And then looking at different platforms. Some kids are great at handwriting. Other kids may need to text write because handwriting is hard for them, or they may have severe spelling problems or things like that. And then also dictating to other students, or dictating to other students is usually a little bit better for persons that don't have the practice to do a dictation on a computer. But those types of platforms can also be something that we can look at. Your project-based learning, I thought, was a great idea, because I think about our kids that have language-based difficulties, our kids that are English language learners, our kids that are struggling learners in whatever area that they have. In a project-based learning, you can go in and you can differentiate and have different levels and different assignments for all of these kids, and that engages them. It gives them different material to look at. It gives them different ways to respond back in what they're trying to accomplish in whatever topic and content area that you're teaching. I really liked that. I like the idea of reflecting on text and then discussing with peers. That's a great way to bring in that engagement there. Using social media. Kids are, they're a lot better at social media than I am. They really are. That is something, you know, the example that you showed of the Instagram. I thought, oh, that is so cool. I just love, and kids that are struggling kids, they can still do that. They can bring in on that. You know, I started thinking about ways that we could get, when somebody wrote in and said, how do we get past the basic information and how do we get to the higher learning? And I thought, okay, if we start with higher learning, like you had just suggested, how can we break that down for our struggling students? There are a lot of ways that we can do that. If you're working in social studies, in current events, there's a great website that is free called newsela.com. Are you guys familiar with it? I love that because it will level text, and it will level those articles so the kids can get it at the reading level they need to have it at, you know. If there's other material that you need that is not in a level text, you can put it very simply. You can bring it over into Microsoft Word, and Microsoft Word will read it to them. You know, and then you have all the built-in tools like the thesaurus and the synonyms in Microsoft Word if there's vocabulary that they don't understand, to help them access that material as they're going through. I was kind of going down, there are free text readers. Sometimes Microsoft Word, the text reader is not the best in the world, but there are some free ones. There's one called Natural Reader that you can bring in digital format, and it will read books. It will bring it in from different things like Project Gutenberg, or you know, all of these other textbooks. It will also bring in web pages, and it will clean up the web page so you're not looking at all the ads and everything else that you have to do. So there are some really nice tools out there that you can use to help make that material accessible to the kids so that they can then turn around and use it when they're doing their writing. Microsoft Word has all of these built-in writing tools. You know, you can look at the level of language that they're using, the complexity of the language, and help build that up as they're doing their writing in the content area. I love the idea of the poetry. You know, when you talked about your young man that you used songs when you were doing the poetry analysis, because poetry analysis was tough on me too. I remember that very well. So, you know, there are all kinds of good ideas, lots of good tools that can be out there that can give kids access to this material and then help support them. There's free stuff out there. There's also paid stuff out there. Word prediction is a great way for our kids that are struggling writers and spellers, because it will help them with content. You can bring in content vocabulary in some of the paid ones, and they can then use that as they're writing, and it will help support their writing and their spelling on that. Okay, so there's a lot of good things out there that you can try to help support your kids when they're engaged in these writing processes, to bring up that writing and give them access to higher level material. Okay, thanks so much.
If you have a question for Dee Dee, feel free to, or any other questions that have come to mind as we come to the end of our presentation, feel free to use the chat feature and ask your question.
And my eyes aren't really good, so you'll have to help me.
You got a thank you. You got a thank you from Ashley Morris.
Okay. Well, it doesn't look like we have any additional questions. So we thank you so much for joining us for the 4th session, Writing Across the Curriculum. We also want to thank our presenters who have given their time and knowledge to this project. And as you prepare to leave us, remember that the follow-up professional learning has a twofold purpose. 1, to guide implementation back in your respective classrooms, and 2, to provide consistent implementation across the state. If this is your first time joining us for the series, please be sure to complete the pre-survey that is located on GeorgiaStandards.Org. There you'll also find the recording of this session. For those of you who have been with us throughout the series, we also have a mid-series survey that we invite you to complete. Your feedback is key in helping us gauge the impact of our series and to identify any necessary shifts to ensure that we are, in fact, providing you with a meaningful professional learning series. We look forward to continuing the conversation on Twitter. Don't forget to use the hashtag Culture of Writing at Godot ELA, and stay tuned for our next month 612 session on disciplinary literacy. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.